By 1851, the first appointed Indian agent, Alonzo Skinner, arrived in the Rogue Valley. Skinner was also the first white settler to file a donation land claim in the area. Skinner was a well-educated man who had previously spent time as a prosecuting attorney and a judge. He chose his original camp along Bear Creek in the shadow of the Table Rocks. This area is now known as Central Point. At the time, there were only a handful of brave, hardy white men living in the harsh, isolated landscape. Skinner Butte, named after Skinner himself, is today called Roxy-Ann Peak. Folks began to move to the area as a result of Skinner's presence and his positive effect on the local Indian tribes. Pioneer families became more confident in their ability to live safely and at peace with the native inhabitants. However, the peaceful coexistence didn't last long. Some of the residents treated the natives poorly. The Indians became resentful and began to retaliate. In 1852, a group of white miners provoked some local Indians, and a deadly fight broke out. Alonzo Skinner attempted to calm both sides, but unfortunately, more than a dozen natives were killed. The war was on. Although Alonzo Skinner continued to encourage peace between the Native Americans and the whites, some settlers wanted nothing to do with a quiet existence. Unfortunately, the war against the Indians continued for several years, resulting in more deaths for both sides. In the midst of the Indian Wars, there was another distinguished settler who resisted the anti-Indian mindset common amongst many of the settlers. Isaac Constant grew up in Illinois and was a friend of Abraham Lincoln. He arrived via wagon train on the Oregon Trail and set out to grow an abundance of potatoes and other vegetables along with wheat and oats. During a particularly severe winter, Constant could see the Indians were starving, and he offered to share a significant amount of food with them. As a result, when the native people of the valley went on the warpath, they left Constant and his family alone. Instead of warring with the Indians, Isaac Constant found a new way to find peace, with food rather than guns. Given the fragile peace agreement of the Native Americans and the ever-growing number of settlers, life remained pretty much the same. Soon that would all change with the discovery of gold in Southern Oregon. Gold was a powerful attraction. When news of its discovery reached other locations, family after family moved in and settled on more donation land claims. Soon the white settlers began to slowly outnumber the natives. In 1856, the Indians were moved to the Grand Ronde and Siletz reservations. As more land became available, families with names such as Hopwood, Rice, Plemmel, Risley, and Magruder came from across the country to put down roots in the valley. Many of these families maintained a presence in the area for generations to come. The Magruder family contributed significantly to the development and growth of Central Point. They opened a post office and a general store in the middle of town that became a gathering place for Central Point residents and travelers alike. U.S. currency was very rare on the western frontier, and the time came when gold dust, bartering, and trading wasn't a popular form of exchange. Theophilus Magruder co-founded the Oregon Exchange Company and created a mint to produce $5 and $10 gold coins. These coins were referred to as beaver money and were used as the new form of monetary exchange in Southern Oregon. In the early days, Constantine Magruder was the owner and holder of trust of the entire town. Today, on the southern border of Central Point, there is a street called Beale Lane, named after another important pioneering family in the area. The Beale brothers, Thomas and Robert, arrived in the valley riding on a mule train over the now legendary Oregon Trail. The trip took just 78 days, which at the time was an all-time record. The Beale brothers were known as the best farmers in the valley in the latter part of the 1800s. In 1863, Robert Beale built a new home in the area, and shortly thereafter planted a small black maple sapling in the yard. The tree is standing today as one of the largest black maples in all of America. It was named an official state heritage tree in the summer of 2009, and it is a living reminder of time gone by.
Robert Vinton Beale, born in 1878, grew up in Central Point. His parents noticed his gift for music early on and encouraged him to perform whenever he could. Tragedy struck when Robert, affectionately called Vinty, was 11 and spinal meningitis left him totally deaf because both of his eardrums burst. For a long time, Vinty was inconsolable and refused to adjust to his silent world. With his parents' encouragement, he discovered he could use art to communicate, and eventually he won awards for his efforts. In the 1890s, he was sent to Salem to learn lip reading and went on to graduate in 1897 from the University of Oregon. Later, he moved to Illinois to learn photography, which he mastered because of his artistic eye. When he moved back to Oregon, he opened a photography studio while also working his father's farm and orchards. When Robert Vinton Beale died, he bequeathed a large sum of money to the University of Oregon. Today, students and music lovers enjoy melodies that Robert himself would not have been able to hear, thanks to the purchase of an impressive organ that is a beautiful fixture in Beale Concert Hall at the university.